Hi, it's Ramsey Dewey at the JX Fight Club in Shanghai, China, and I'm going to answer one of the most commonly asked questions that I get both on YouTube and in real life, which is, Ramsey, how did you get into mixed martial arts in the first place? So I first heard about MMA when I was 17 years old. It was back in 1996. They didn't actually call it MMA back then. They called it NHB, or No Holds Barred, cage fighting, or ultimate fighting. The term MMA didn't come until later. And I was watching TV. There was a news program where they were talking about the UFC. It was brand new at the time. Everybody was either very excited or very scared by it because nobody had seen anything like it before, except conceptually in movies like Bloodsport or Enter the Dragon. And so it caught my attention right away because I wanted to learn how to fight. I loved martial arts, and again, in my hometown, there were no martial arts schools. So I was like, man, what is this? What is this fighting thing? So they interviewed a guy named Mark Schultz, who at the time was the wrestling coach at Brigham Young University. He was a former Olympic gold medalist. More recently, they made a movie about him and his brother, Foxcatcher, if you've seen it. Very interesting film. Go check that out. And they showed some old clips of some old fights, like Emmanuel Yarborough, the big sumo, versus Keith Hackney, the smaller karate guy. And it was mind-blowing stuff. And, there was no internet back then, so we couldn't, look it up and see what it was all about. So, that short TV clip was all I got for the longest time until later that year, I got accepted to Brigham Young University, the same school that Mark Schultz was coaching at. Now, I wasn't a wrestler. I didn't wrestle in high school. I learned how to wrestle as an adult, specifically for the sport of mixed martial arts. So I didn't really put two and two together that I was going to the school where the guy on TV who was, doing MMA actually coached until I got there. And BYU offered a taekwondo class. Actually, they listed it as a karate class. And I got really excited, like, all right, I'm going to learn karate, I'm going to learn martial arts for real with a real legit instructor. So I signed up for the class, and it wasn't karate, it turned out to be taekwondo. The instructor was a 6th degree black belt from Korea, and he was fantastic at taekwondo. He could do all the cool Hollywood spinning kicks, and I was very excited about this, learning from a legitimate master. And our taekwondo class was held in the wrestling room, Mark Schultz wrestling room. And on the very first day, the taekwondo coach, he gave us all this very stern lecture and said, whatever you do not damage the mats, do not scratch the mats, do not mark the mats, or the wrestling coach will kill me. And we all laughed. No way the wrestling coach can kill you. You're a taekwondo guy, you could kick his butt. And he said, no, you don't understand. He's a real fighter, not like me. He's a real fighter. He fights in a cage with no rules, no weight classes, no time limit. That got my attention. I remember looking around the room and I saw this big red wrestling dummy that looked really familiar because it was the one that Mark Schultz was throwing around on that newsreel. I was like, wait a minute. Oh, that's the guy. That's the guy. So, later, because of Title IX and some other conflicts, they cut the wrestling program at BYU. Mark Schultz had to move on. I never really got to know the guy that well. I mean, saw him in passing in the hall on my way to my taekwondo class, but no, didn't wrestle with him. But the guy left an indelible impression on me, which is, here's this guy at the most conservative university in America, probably. If you're not familiar with BYU, Brigham Young University, it's a church-owned school, owned by the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, the Mormons. those guys in the white shirts and ties and name tags who knock on your door and want to tell you all about the church, right? How to be a fine, upstanding citizen and not smoke or drink or have premarital sex or anything like that, and go to church on Sundays and, just be a beacon of virtue. And here at this school that embraced these values, we had a coach who was a cage fighter. Now today, everybody's a cage fighter now. Back then, nobody was. Nobody was doing this. Especially, back then, no rules, no time limits, no weight classes. And, people were scared of this idea. It was a big, scary idea. We didn't know what to think of it. In fact, the president of the university gave Coach Schultz an ultimatum, which was, either quit this UFC thing or quit the wrestling program. You can't do both because we don't want all this negative backlash from this cage fighting thing reflecting poorly on this upstanding university. And, today, if they did that today, I would roll my eyes. Back then, the public considered it human cockfighting. It was not a popular thing to be a cage fighter back then. Just to watch a UFC event, you had to know a guy who knew a guy who could get a bootleg VHS copy that he taped from a friend of a friend, or buy the pay-per-view if you had cable. But it wasn't easy to get to see the previous events. So if you wanted to watch UFC 1, man, you had to know some people and you had to do your homework. And you had to be just really dedicated just to watch it. It wasn't available in stores or video stores or anything like that back then. At least not where I lived, not in Utah, where I was going to school. So, yeah, it was a big to-do with that. I remember reading about it in the school newspaper, oh man, they're threatening to fire the coach if he doesn't quit the UFC. Ultimately, he quit the UFC, but then they ended up cutting the wrestling program anyway, so he went and did a fight down in Brazil. And anyway, he's told his story, so I don't need to do that. But this is my story, how I got into it. But yeah, Coach Schultz left this indelible impression on me, which is, hey, this is a big counterculture thing. People don't accept it right now, but it's something that you can do. And it just stayed with me until several years later, a fight promoter decided to start a MMA show in Utah, which again was mind-boggling because Utah is best known for skiing and Mormons, not cage fighting. Cage fighting, at least back then, was like the polar opposite of what you would expect from the most densely populated Mormon culture on planet Earth. But again, when I found out there was a cage fighting show, a professional no-holds-barred fighting show, again, we still didn't call it MMA back then. I remember thinking, I have to do this. I want to do this. But I didn't do it right away. I was very reluctant to step out of my box because I was firmly established in Taekwondo and traditional martial arts and striking arts and that sort of thing. And I was still of the mindset, grappling, I don't need to know that. Wrestling, whatever. Even though I knew Mark Schultz was a legitimate, fantastic fighter and very skilled wrestler who had proved himself. Again, this guy is good at fighting. I still thought, wrestling, that's not a real martial art. I don't need to do that. I can make it on my own with Taekwondo. Yeah. Guys, please don't be dogmatic about your martial arts. Okay, if you want to be a complete fighter, you have to know how to wrestle. If you don't know how to wrestle, you don't know how to fight. All right, same thing with boxing. If you don't know how to box, you don't know how to fight. Okay? So be a well-rounded fighter. I mean, learn your taekwondo, your karate, whatever your martial art is, and learn everything else too. You don't have to master everything, but please be well-informed about everything. We can at least do that. But this MMA show, they also hosted kickboxing and Muay Thai matches. And there came a time where I was really desperate for money. I had some medical bills I couldn't pay. I was working several jobs. And at the end of the month, there just wasn't enough. I was just coming up short every time. And this fight show didn't even offer a lot. They offered $50 to show and $100 to win for your first fight. And gradually they increased the pay rate if you kept fighting. Just not much though. So it turned out I just needed $50 more to break even that month. I thought, man, what am I going to do? What am I going to do? And I had this martial arts background, this taekwondo background, this karate background, and I thought, well, they have kickboxing. That's like taekwondo. That's kind of like karate. I can do that. So I signed up for a fight. I thought, it's not going to be that hard. They said, all right, you're fighting this guy. He's got some amateur boxing experience. I think he has a Kenpo background. And you're going to fight him on Saturday. I was like, oh, okay, wow, this is getting real. So I'd never even put on a set of boxing gloves before because, all my training was bare knuckle. And so I got in a boxing ring. And I got my butt kicked for 3 straight rounds. I got knocked down, but I remember thinking, like, can't end like this. If I quit, they won't call me back. I need that money. So I kept getting up. I kept trying to win. And I took a beating for 3 rounds. And I got my $50, and I actually had to spend half of it on a copay at the hospital to get this ear stitched back on because it got separated a little bit. But I thought, you know what? I can do that again. I can take a hit. I'm not made out of glass. I mean, that fight, it woke me up to what real full contact fighting is. Like, wow, I just took 90 hits and I'm okay. And I can do better than that. Man, I experienced stage fright. I froze up a lot. I didn't really execute my technique very well because, again, I wasn't training for that kind of fight. Again, there's a huge difference between kickboxing and taekwondo competition. As soon as you can punch the face, as soon as you take off the pads, put on the gloves, whole different thing. So I did it again. And I did it again, and I did it again, and again, and again. I did all these kickboxing matches, kickboxed for a few years. And then I tried a Muay Thai fight. And at some point, I got on the internet. There was this internet forum about this fight show. And I was chatting on there. And this guy who was a fighter, had a few fights under his belt, challenged me. Challenged me to a fight. And I accepted. I thought, well, why not? He said, oh, you're just a kickboxer. If we did an MMA fight, I would beat you. I thought, well, I'm a pragmatic person. There's only one way to find out. So I accepted the challenge, and we went in there and fought. So here's what happened. If you look up the fight on SureDog.com, it says I won by a guillotine choke. That's not actually true. I had a front headlock on him, but he tapped out to liver shots. See, I didn't know anything about grappling back then. My very first MMA fight, I didn't know anything about grappling. I went in there with a straight striking background. Traditional martial arts and what I learned through, kickboxing, full contact kickboxing and Muay Thai. Again, I wasn't training properly when I started. I wasn't training with a camp. I wasn't training with a specific gym. I was training myself, which again is a really stupid thing to do. But that's what I was doing. So I got in there against this guy, and I got lucky because, he wasn't that good. So we clinched up. I remember he kneed me in the groin. He straight up kneed me in the groin. I remember I looked over at the ref didn't see it. I was like, well, he's not stopping it. I guess I got to continue. So I started throwing some liver shots, shovel hooks right in the liver with the left hand. He crumpled down a little bit, broke his posture. I got a front headlock, kept throwing some more. Okay, he crumpled onto his knees. I ended up on top. I threw some more liver shots. Again, I had the front headlock, which looks like a guillotine choke, I guess. And he started tapping out. Little taps, just little taps. And the referee didn't see it. I looked up at the referee. I noticed the referee didn't stop the fight. So I kept hitting him. Boom, boom, harder, right in that same spot until those taps got bigger, big enough for the ref to see. The referee ran over, stopped the fight, and I won. Woo! Okay. And I thought, well, that wasn't that hard. That wasn't too bad. MMA is kind of like kickboxing, except you can keep hitting them on the ground, right? This was my mentality. I don't really need to learn how to wrestle or do jiu-jitsu or any of that. I'm fine. Let's do this again. So I did it again. Okay? But some of the guys I fought actually knew how to grapple, so I wasn't always that lucky. And I very quickly learned, you need to be a complete fighter. Okay? The rest is history. I took jiu-jitsu classes, learned how to wrestle, learned how to box, expanded my horizons, and if you haven't yet, please do. Whether you plan on stepping into a cage for a fight, amateur, professional, or just if you consider yourself an honest martial artist, okay? Again, martial arts is a pursuit of the truth. And the truth of a fight is, can you win it or not? And if you want to win, be as well informed about fighting as you can. So anyway, that's my story about how I got into MMA. Now my story about how I got into training the right way, that's a different one. But I've rambled long enough. So hey, thanks for listening. Keep the questions coming. Like, subscribe, all that good stuff. And leave some comments for me down below. Thanks for watching. Now, get out there and train, guys.